ودي لي سلامي يا رايح للحرم وادعي لي وسلم لي
Assalamu
على
alaikum everyone, welcome to another
هدي
podcast from the Muslim Interlude with your host Ismail. Today we have a man who needs no introduction in Manchester, I'm saying that much. We've got Ustadh Rehan from Cheadle Masjid, and I could list a number of things where Ustadh Rehan's from, but I think we'll be here all day. But BarakAllahu feekum, Ustadh, for joining us today. I know taking your time out of your busy schedule, I know how busy you are.
I think you're busier than me, Ismail, to be honest.
Honestly, I don't think I am. I know how busy you are. So, BarakAllahu feekum for joining us once again. Jazakallah khair. I know we take a lot of people's time with ISoc. We test people's generosity. We test the timing of the schedules, but we have to guilt trip you every now and again. I think that's how I managed to get.
Pleasure.
Well, we'll just get straight into it. So actually, do you know what I was going to do? I never told you I was going to do this, actually. And don't tell any of the speakers. Normally, I do it at the end. So what I try and do is I try and personalize it a little bit. And we get to know the speaker a little bit more that way. And there's actually a game called the Freshly Grounded game. It's like
you
know it, don't you? Do you know it?
No, I don't actually, but I'm just thinking what to expect.
No, it's just questions, basically, like deep questions or something, just to get to know the speaker a little bit.
Okay.
I've only got 3. To be honest, this game is like 20 games, and especially if the speakers know each other, it's sort of back and forward, but we won't do that. I've not got much to add to this, so what we'll do, we'll just ask you. How does that sound? Is that all right?
Go ahead, Bismillah.
Okay, the first question is, what is your favorite dua from the Sunnah?
Allahu Akbar. That's a very good question. I'd say رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. There's a reason for that. Primarily because it actually talks about moderation, which we'll probably talk about. But actually, you see that the Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide towards having good in this dunya and the akhirah. It's not just for one or the other. So yeah, that's one.
I like that one. To be honest, that's been given a few times. I've asked that question.
That's really
not on the podcast.
Right.
I've asked different people, and that's actually been given a couple of times.
Right.
I like that. Name one thing you love about the way that you've been raised.
That's a hard one, yeah. What's that one?
Do you know what that is, though? You can change that because it's more, I think, towards your parents, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think, so my mum's got a, classic quote, and she keeps reminding me no matter what. She says to me that being a Muslim is not all about books, That's what she was telling me, because, when you're trying to study, she said it's about character and about how you deal with people. So every time I'm trying to read something or I'm doing something, and she'll say, it's not just about books, Rehan. It's about how you deal with people. So I think that's one thing that she's really instilled into me, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, that's good. You can see that, because it's about how you implement it rather than just reading all the time, I guess.
Yeah.
I like that. Think about someone in your life who's no longer here. What's one thing that they taught you?
So I think there was someone, subhanallah, and do you mind if I give a small story, or is it?
Oh, of course, go for it. No.
So this individual is an uncle. No, actually, there's 2 people. There's someone I saw recently. So I'll tell you something very briefly. There was, when I was really young, I used to go to someone's house. It was actually it was a family member. They were like my second cousins. And I used to go to the house when I was small, when I was probably like 11, 12, maybe smaller than that, actually. And there used to be an older girl. She was my cousin. She's about 10 years older than me. And she always, whenever I used to go to the house, because it's full of elders, she always used to take the time to speak to me, right? And she took her time out. She would, chat with me, play with me, whatever. And even though they're adults, everyone, I used to get bored, and she used to basically spend her time with me. And I haven't spoken to or seen her for about 30 years, because I remember the day, not 30 years, maybe about 20 years, something like that. So I remember the day she got married and she moved away, right? And I remember at that time I felt like a bit sad, because she was like the first person in my life who had given me time. And I saw her last week, and it was at a janazah, unfortunately. But when I saw her, she was like, subhanAllah, it's a very personal thing, and I won't mention it to anyone. But she said to me, because when I saw her, I found out she was in the car because she was at the burial ground. And I went to see her, and we hadn't seen each other for like 20 years, something like that. And she said to me, I've always loved you from when you were young. And she was like, come here. And she was like, really, subhanAllah. And I said, I used to really respect how you used to be with me. And she said, I love to spend time with you and my sister. And I just thought, I've always thought of her, no matter what, even though I haven't spoken to her, I have such respect for her. So anyway, I don't know why I'm going off, but I thought it was very important that, you know, the time that you spend with people who are younger, that quality time that you give, don't actually debase that, because you will maybe change someone's life because of it.
It stays with you for a long time as well,
Long
doesn't it?
time, man, long time.
And it can even sculpt to relationships. From what we've seen, even what psychology says, that what your relationships are from when you're younger, it sculpts what your relationships are going to be like when you're older.
Yeah,
you
very
associate
true.
it, don't you, with what you
Yeah.
already know.
Yeah.
So now, subhanAllah, good story. I like it. It's a nice deep way to start the podcast.
I wasn't planning
I think
that,
I might
to be
change
honest,
it. Do you know, that was good. Normally, do you know what I do? I actually do it at the end. And I
Yeah.
like it. It's like a little nice little send off for the podcast,
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
get to know. But I thought, you know what, Ustadh Rehan, let's do a little tester on him. Keep him on his toes a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. It's not even 5 minutes in, man. I'm already
Oh,
on my
5 minutes
toes.
in and we're getting a little bit deep. It's all right. It's a good way to go. Okay, what we're going to be talking about today, just for a little background, we're going to be talking about time management, balancing time and ihsan and prioritizing and stuff, which is funny because we've got the two worst people on here who've got time management problems.
Yeah.
Now, Ustadh Rehan's probably better than me, to be honest. So I'm here. That's why I wanted this, because it's more for myself than anyone else. Take some tips and tricks.
Yeah, as I was saying, I really, if my wife's watching, it's not going to be good, because she's going to, I'm sure she's going to refute me.
It's a good thing there's not a call. It's funny you said on the phone, didn't you? It's a good thing there's not a call line here. You'd be calling up.
I was going to
What
say,
are you talking about? It's not true. First question I wanted to ask, actually, it's like an overall, basically. It's like I guess it's a running theme, a theme of how we should achieve all three: balanced time management, even whilst we're trying to do that. What is ihsan?
Ihsan. So, Taban, from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, as we know in the hadith of Jibreel, from an Islamic perspective, and then I'll give from a more kind of day-to-day perspective. Ihsan, Taban, is an ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tarahu fa'in lam tarahu fa'innahu yarak. That to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see him, and if you do not see him, or as you do not see him, he sees you. So ihsan, from a kind of an Islamic perspective, from ahsana yuhsinu, is basically to ensure that you do everything in a way which is knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is observing you, and so doing something in the best possible way. And the best possible way, of course, is to make sure that what you do is sincere for the sake of Allah, but also that you do it in the way of the Prophet ﷺ, as mentioned by Fudail ibn Iyad, in terms of an act which is accepted by Allah. That it has to be sincere for the sake of Allah, and it has to be in accordance with the Sunnah. But in terms of ihsan generally, ihsan, like I said, ahsana yuhsinu, from the verb ahsana, to do something in the best possible with excellence, right? And I suppose one of the things that when we look at kind of how we understand time management, priorities, and all the things we're going to talk about, is that actually the Muslim, he does things in the best way possible. And that should be a state of mind, itqan, yani perfection, doing things in the best way possible. Taban, I'm probably the last person to talk about doing things in the best way, but that doesn't mean that we should not be encouraging each other to do things in the best way. And that can be in anything, in terms of how you spend time with people, how you write a research paper, how you clean something up, how you pray your prayers. Everything is done in the best possible way. So that's kind of a general about ihsan.
How does this is just questions came to my mind, actually, because I was talking, we had a podcast a while ago talking about preparing for Ramadan and the concept of Ramadan and taqwa and being mindful of Allah. How does that coincide with ihsan? Because you mentioned that ihsan is like being mindful of Allah, knowing that He's watching, doing it, doing acts for that reason. Are they similarities or?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, if you have ihsan, and as we know, you have iman, you have Islam, iman, and ihsan is the kind of the top in terms of the three levels. If you have ihsan, you're known as a muhsin. And of course, that's to an extent synonymous with the concept of being a muttaqi, someone who has taqwa. And taqwa, as we know, you've probably covered before, but is basically that you put between yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the punishment of Allah, a barrier, i.e. that you do not disobey Him and that you obey Him. So you do everything He's commanded and everything you stay away from which is prohibited. If you do that, you're known as a muttaqi. Now, ihsan is essentially the same, because as we said, is that you act as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing you even though you do not see Him. And so they're both quite synonymous. The overarching thing though, Ismail, is that essentially what you're doing is that and Imam Ghazali mentions this, that, you know, fi sakanatik, and in your normal kind of, in your stillness, and when you're walking, or when you're, you know, you're traveling, when you're at home, wherever you are, you're always under the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, muttala alayh, that He's always watching over me. And so when someone gets to that state where we ask Allah, He gives us that state. If you're at that state, then every single moment that you're doing something, you're knowing that, am I doing this for the sake of Allah? Am I doing it for something else? Even if it means you're going to the shop, why am I going to the shop? And you say to yourself that I'm going to get bread and milk and eggs. Huh? But the reality is that you're going because you want to feed the family. You're going because you want to get something for your mother and father, because you want to please Allah. And so essentially, ihsan and taqwa, they're both interchangeable, but in the sense that knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always observing you.
Okay, it's a good start. It's just I wanted to clarify that, because there's no point talking about balance and time management if we can't achieve these things first, or have that throughout the things that we're going to be balancing or managing time. Okay, so I think we'll just go straight into balancing then. What is, even in a secular environment, whether it's secular, whether it's with Islam, whether it's balancing knowledge with university, let's say student audience, what is it, what does it look like balancing these things?
So, you can quote many evidences and kind of quotes on that. I mean, we know that Allah says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, that we have made you a middle nation, a just nation, but also a middle nation. And, the reality is that the concept of balance is actually really important, because we know that from even from an Islamic creed perspective, you can go into exaggeration, you can go into areas whereby I don't know what the word is now, but you kind of excel. You cannot excel, but you go to the fringes. So, for example, the Khawarij.
Is it excessive?
Yeah, excessive, exactly. So they say about the Khawarij that they recite the Quran, and it's like buzzing bees in a camp, etc. They go to one excess that the Prophet ﷺ would debase them, and he would say that the hadith about that. On the other hand, people who don't believe, there's a middle path whereby you take that path where you give everything its right. And actually that comes through knowledge, which we'll talk about. But knowing balance is basically that you know what you need to do at the particular time, right? And so we know in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which I believe is in Sahih Bukhari, about Salman and Abu Darda. You may have touched upon it in a previous podcast, but very briefly, the Prophet ﷺ did a khuwa between Salman and Abu Darda. And Salman went to visit Abu Darda, and he went to stay at his house. And when Salman saw Abu Darda's wife, he said that she was quite in shabby clothing. And he says, why are you in this clothing? And she said that the Abu Darda, radiallahu anh, his only concern is the akhirah. So anyway, they ate, they went to sleep, and then Abu Darda woke up to pray the prayer. And he went to wake up Salman. And Salman radiallahu anh said, go to sleep. And so he went back to sleep. And then he woke him up again in the night. He said, no, go back to sleep. Then Salman woke up, and then he woke up Abu Darda in the third part of the night. So anyway, after the kind of these discussions and after seeing what was happening, Salman said to Abu Darda, he said, radiallahu anhuma, that inna li rabbika alayka haqq, that your Lord has a haqq, right? Wa inna li nafsika alayka haqq, that your nafs, your soul has a haqq. Wa inna li ahlika alayka haqq, that your family have a haqq, right? فَأَعْطِي كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّ, that give every single thing its right? So Abu Darda at that time, when he heard that, and of course, it's a slight admonishment, but he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, this is what happened. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, Sadaqa Salman, that Salman spoke the truth. Meaning that your family has a right, yourself has a right, your Lord has a right. You can't be worshipping Allah all the time and forget your family. And you can't be thinking about and playing with your family and forgetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can't be thinking about yourself all the time and about what you want to eat and what you want to do, and you remove everything else. So essentially, Ismail, that the balance, from what I feel personally, my personal experience, is that balance is dependent upon the individual. Not everyone's going to follow the same thing. If you're like a scientist, then of course you're probably going to spend more time in your career, though you have to have a balance with kind of what you're doing. If you're someone who's working in the community, more balance might be having a bit more time with the community and doing relative things, but it's all relative to the individual. But one has to look at that, how much are they observing the rights of those around them, and how much are they neglecting them. That's very important.
How does one achieve that though? Let's say you might be starting a new job, or you might have just started, you might be like, I'm in my final year now, I'm going to start my dissertation soon, I might be doing my dissertation. It takes up a big chunk of your time, and in that moment, it's sort of like, you used the word at the beginning, it's excessive. It's an excessive amount of time you're spending there, and then so it's guaranteed. Normally you have 24 hours in a day. It would be split up. On an ideal world, it would be split up between multiple activities. But if my time is then taken away, that means I'm lacking in one area. Is that a problem, and what can this cause for like later stages?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a problem as long as it's not continuous, right? So the reason I say is that what happens in life, and we were talking before, sometimes when you're starting a business, when you've got a deadline for an exam, whether it's secular, religious, you go through times in life whereby you have to meet particular deadlines, right? There's no problem if you change the goalposts a bit and you say, okay, I'm going to focus more time on that. But the main thing is that it's not meant to be continuous. I mean, like, for example, if you look at, I don't want, I was reading something. There's a book called Qimatul Zaman and al Ulama by Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, a very famous scholar. And he talks about how the scholars used to use their time. And I was thinking, when I was reading some of it before, I've read it quite a few times in terms of different segments of it. And you'd think that if you tell the people about this, then people are going to be shocked, like, we're just wasting our life. But at the same time, it's also important to recognize. So he mentions that there's a mufassir called Alusi, Imam al-Alusi. He does a tafsir called Tafsir al-Alusi. And so he said that he used to have 13. So what he would do is he would do iftar, basically giving fatwas in the day, and he would be teaching in the day up to 13 classes. And then in the evening, in the first part of the evening, he'd have time with his kind of family and just people who had needs from him. Then he'd sleep a little bit, and then in the night he would be writing his tafsir. And they said that he was doing this, for years, and he wrote his tafsir in the evening, and he was attending to the needs of the people in the day, to the point that even during his illness towards the end of his life, he was still doing that same thing. The same with Imam al-Nawawi. He used to have 12 classes a day, then he'd come and memorize in the night. And he wasn't married, so it's slightly different. But the point being is that some people really excelled in what they did. Now, did they have other commitments? Yes, they probably did have commitments. And I would say that it's not easy, and we shouldn't potentially compare to those pious predecessors in terms of our time, because a lot of them had barakah. They said that Imam Nawawi said that he just had barakah in his time. That was the natural element. But what I would say is that if you have these small pockets of 1 year that you have to do this, for example, you've got a dissertation, you've got an exam, there's no problem to excel at that particular point in order to ihsan and itqan and excellence in what you do. But what you just need to make sure that you try and make that up. I mean, my wife is probably going to say, where do you make it up? Because the reality, there's so much going on. But in your mind, you do have to try to do that, because what will happen, the heart can become hard and it can find things difficult. So you have to always keep it refreshed with different things.
What are some practical steps one can take? I was going to talk about the steps later on, but I think it'd be quite nice just to bring the balance into it. What can someone do to sort of split their time up in a way where they are fulfilling the rights of even their worship, the obligations first, the parents, if they've got kids, the wife, anything, gym, even body, health, could be anything.
So, I mean, again, I was going to talk about this, but I'll mention it now. Personally, and this is a personal thing, and I'm sure that others find the same, that we waste a lot of time, especially with phones now and things like that, and social media. Our attention spans have really been hit. One of the things that, in terms of some things I would say for people in order to organize themselves properly, is number one, I would say that the morning is really important. Though some of the ulama use the evening and the night as a time, it can depend on the individual. Some of the ulama are known that in the depths of the night they were working and revising, and they would sleep after Fajr. Some people would stay up, and we know that it's from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that in the morning there's barakah. There's no doubt though, if you get up early and you work from the morning where everyone is kind of still tired, number one, that's the best thing to do. And what I mean by that is basically making sure that you take advantage of your time. The second thing I would say is that the phone, I'll be honest with you, the phone with its notifications. So I've started doing something recently, and I'm failing a bit, but I feel good. Because I took off my notifications, many months ago. But what I do is I try to check it only 2 or 3 times in the day now. And what happens is you keep the phone in a separate room, and you just focus, whatever you're doing, whether it's spending time with your family, whether it's, you know, working, whether it's writing or whatever you're doing, you just keep it separate. And I'm telling you, it has such an impact in what you can do in that 2 hours. So for example, I was doing some memorization of something, and I managed to do it in, you know, an hour, 45 minutes, whereas other times it's taken me 2 hours, because what I was doing after 15, 20 minutes, I was going on my phone, checking something, Facebook, responding, checking my WhatsApp. When you're doing that every 10, 15 minutes, you completely lose sight. So number one, I'd say, second thing I would say is that focus on, you know, keeping the phone away from you, to be totally honest. If you can fast it completely, that's excellent. But if you can't, you can't. And in terms of generally other ideas in terms of time management, you should have a to-do list. I mean, that's a standard. Microsoft have this good one called MS To Do. It used to be called Wunderlist before they bought it out. The reason why I follow it, because it's actually really important to have a good to-do list, which you're referring to. You plan stuff out in the morning. If you don't have a to-do list, if you don't plan, as they say, you know, the classic, if you fail to plan, or if you fail to plan to fail, or something like that, the other way around.
If you fail to prepare,
fail to plan,
to fail.
you plan to fail. So the thing is, that's standard, that if you don't plan your days out, then you'll just be taken for a ride by everyone.
Someone said, I was listening to, actually, it was another podcast I was listening to, and they were talking about routines and how important they are. And they said, even if you just have a morning routine in which, say, you wake up after Fajr straight away, like for me, it's coffee. Like I like my coffee, so straight away you have your coffee and whatnot, but then you start your day.
Yeah.
So even if you plan your day or a routine, every day you do the same thing. Let's say you start work at 8 o'clock, but you've got 2 hours there. Then that's most important. One thing I saw, actually, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me mentioning, there was Ustadh Hisham, and he, on his Instagram, he had a routine he wrote, or it might have been.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's very good. Yeah,
very good. Honestly, it sort of made me think a lot. I looked at it and I thought about it a lot, because I thought he's very, very busy. I know what he's like. He's very busy. He's got kids. He's got family, but there's whilst he was waiting, he dropped his child off to school, and he was waiting for 20 minutes or whatnot. And he said he had his book out and he was reading for 20 minutes just to use that time.
You know that stuff, Ismail. Honestly, like even some of our teachers, you know, Sheikh Abdullah, Hafidullah, they said that even when he was riding on his bike to go to classes, where he had the Quran, riding on the bike, and he was holding the Quran. And like Ustadh Hisham, mashallah, you know, may Allah protect him and keep him firm. And, you know, mashallah, those sort of kind of, that routine is very important. Some of them said, you know, some kind of these theorists also say that, you know, just making your bed in the morning on a regular basis will keep that routine, whereby you're making sure that you're doing something regular, and that it's all about discipline. But I want to talk about discipline, because discipline is very important, but we can talk about it later.
A motivational speaker, actually, and he stood at the front and he said, if you want to change the world, the first thing you need to do is make your bed in the morning. And everyone started laughing at him. But what he was actually trying to start off with was that this is the first step you need to take. And he built up on it. Of course, he didn't just say that was the way you need to change the world. He's basically saying discipline accounts, but if you want to change the world, first make your bed in the morning and go from there. Don't think you can go and conquer something next and then you've not even done your basics.
And you know, they say that there's two types of pain, isn't there? There's the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. And you know, I really, really hold to that, in the sense that the pain of regret is that if you have got a goal, which we'll talk about in a moment, if you've got a goal, then if you don't meet the objectives you need to get that goal, you're going to regret it 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, 20 years down the line. You know, you wanted to achieve something. Let's say you wanted to memorize the Quran, you wanted to be a scientist, you wanted to be a doctor, whatever you wanted to do. If you waste your time watching Netflix and, you know, messing about here and there, and you don't achieve it, that pain is worse than the pain of discipline by saying to your friends that, look, I've not got time at the moment, I need to study. I've not got time at the moment to go out because I need to do my hifz of Quran. And so people really need to recognize that, you know, the concept of time is something that you can't, you know, people talk about time management. You can't manage time. You can only manage yourself. Do you get my point? So people need to really realize, and I first and foremost myself, that time will go regardless. It's how you manage yourself in those situations.
Is that to say, though, that there shouldn't have your own time? So like you were saying that, okay, you're going to waste time on Netflix, or you're going to waste your time doing this and that. But is there not a need for recreational time as well? Like you need
100%. No, 100%. I mean, when I say about Netflix, I mean like over
No,
over the
that's
top
fine.
Netflix.
University students, we understand. We
Yeah,
waste
yeah.
hours. That's our procrastination.
So yeah, I mean, the thing is, yeah, of course you need to give time. Otherwise, what happens is you get malal, you get this boredom, right? So, but I would say that people should try to schedule that time. So what happens is that if you don't schedule a time to have recreational, they call it tarwih al-nafs. Basically, you give that time for the nafs, for the soul to kind of recuperate. Whether it's watching, people watching Urtugul Osman or whatever they're doing, of course, something Sharia compliant, of course. So they're playing football or whatever. You definitely need to give that. No one's expecting you to continue being under ibadah, etc. But what I would say is the best thing is to try where possible to schedule that. Every time your nafs calls you to do something, when you succumb to it immediately, it will always take you for a ride. Our scholars, some of our teachers used to say that, the nafs should be the horse, like they should, and you should be the rider, right? Or the dunya, the nafs, in the sense that whatever the nafs is saying, you're the one that's dictating when it's going to, it's going to go to the masjid, it's going to eat now, it's going to, take time out. You as an individual should dictate that. It shouldn't be the opposite way around, where you are the horse and the nafs is guiding you, right? Because what happens is that every time that the nafs says, I want to check my phone, every time it says, I want to eat, I want to watch something, if you follow it every single time, you're just giving it strength and you get used to it. Whereas what happens is for the first few days, weeks, when you start to say to yourself, you know what, I want to eat something now, or I want to watch Netflix. No, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to focus. After a while, your nafs gets, mannered. Essentially, it's mannering the nafs. And so this is a very important point. And actually, I mentioned a point that I know this is just normal kalam, isn't it? In the sense there's no structure. So we're just talking, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's all right,
yeah, of course.
So one thing I noticed recently, the scholars of Tazkiyah, and it's interesting because it matches between purification of the heart and time management, is that they said in order to subdue the nafs in the sense of getting closer to Allah and not being taken by your desires, there are 4 things which you need to control. And they are basically, there's 4 things you need to ensure. Qillatul ta'am, qillatul kalam, qillatul manam, wa qillatul ikhtilat ma'al anam. So basically 4 things that basically not in the same order. So basically speaking less, eating less, sleeping less, and associating with others less, right? And so what they said is that, for example, speaking less is that you only speak when you need to. Unless you've got something good to say, then say it. Otherwise, if it's not good to say, then don't say it, because it'll be something against you on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So when you speak less, whether it's on Facebook and stuff like that, if you've got something good to say, brilliant, no problem. But if it's something which doesn't have a fa'idah or the benefit, then it's better not to say anything and let that time go. The second is that you eat less, right? Meaning that you don't fill your stomach in every single time, because by doing that, what happens is you end up, you become hard-hearted. Imam Shafi and others would say that the heart would become hard when you eat too much. And so by keeping your food intake at a relative level, it helps you to focus, right? So that's the other thing. The third is, what was the third one, Yar? Sleeping less. Sleeping less. So the third one essentially is that you try to, reduce your sleep. I'm not saying you go down to 3-4 hours, though people like Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, Sheikh Ibn Baz, and many of the other scholars, they sleep 3 or 4 hours a night. SubhanAllah, I don't know how they do that, SubhanAllah, how they did that, but Allah gave them barakah. But many of the other scholars were the same, whereby they slept for a small amount of time. But at least do, if you're doing 6 or 7 hours, whatever, but don't oversleep. And by doing that, what happens is you allow yourself to give your time for tahajjud, to give your time for other things. And then the final thing is that you associate with people less, i.e. that people who don't have a benefit and they're just, wasting your time or whatever, that you associate less. Now, the link between all of that is if you do those 4 things where you manner those 4 elements of your life, then you will have control of the nafs. But byproduct of that, you have more time and you're ensuring that your time is spent on the important things. Do you get my point? So there's actually a link between tazkiyat al-nafs or tasawwuf, for kind of purity of the heart, and between maximizing and taking barakah in one's life.
There was actually I was listening to something a while ago, and they were saying that in Jannah people are going to have one regret, and then it was a conversation actually with two people, and they were saying like, how can someone in Jannah have regret? Like what have they got to regret? And he was saying that the one regret that they're going to have is the 1 second that they didn't spend in the cause of Allah, because they could have done more. I guess in that second that they didn't, they could have done it. Even that's like in the statement in itself, it sort of summarizes what we need to do. And even every day when you wake up, the opportunity that you've been given. And I was talking about this, actually talking to this on a different podcast, saying that every morning when we wake up, the opportunities that we've been given, even like around us now, with all this virus going, the amount of people that are passing, even close people, friends, young people, every day you look back on it, you think that you've been given an opportunity now. You've woke up this morning. What can you now do with your day? And if you start your day off like that, or even if you read the morning adhkar that you've been given, a lot of them are for that reason. Although you've given me my sort of like your day again, you could have took my soul, but you give me that. If you start saying all this, it gives you the mindset to start your day off, I think, and plan your day properly and use it wisely, I guess. Because like we said at the beginning, you can have your balance and you can have your time and stuff, but if you're not using it for good, what's good in balancing this two wrong things? It doesn't make sense.
100%. That's why I want to ask you, Ismail. So tell me, Yani, what's from your perspective, what's the 1 or 2 top tips for balance and time management?
You know what? I actually don't have much. The only thing I can say is from experience that when I was at uni, when I first started second year uni, actually, that was probably the busiest I've been, more so because COVID wasn't here and we had to actually go out the house. But I had started ISoc work, and the second year uni is quite busy in itself, and I had work going on. And then at that time, my dad was away as well, so I had family businesses to run. So, and in the evening, I used to like going to the gym, and that's one thing I never used to let go of. Even if my day was ruined, I'd just forget whatever it was. So I'd go to the gym at 8 o'clock. But the problem with that was, which I thought about yesterday, actually, when I was talking to you and you were saying, send me a list of stuff you want to talk about. And when I was writing it down, I actually noted down my own experience, because at that time, my day used to start early. I used to be after you start at uni at 9 o'clock. So after Fajr at that time in winter, you sort of Fajr time and you go to uni. So then, but I never used to get back till 7:30 in the evening to home, mostly because ISoc was in the evening or talks were going on at afterwards end, and then I'd get home 7:30, and then 8 o'clock would be the time for the gym. So the only time I'd have is 30 minutes in the day, and then 10 p.m. I'd get home, and then by then everyone's gone to bed.
Wow.
Honestly, that was most days.
Than I am, man.
No, that was back then. I realised then. Now I just stay home. I try to spend as much time as I can home. But it was then you realise obviously you're missing out on something. You have to sort of not give up something, but you have to. That's when I realised that you have to balance sort of what you do have, because again, like you said, you only have a certain amount of time in the day, don't you? So in there, okay, you can go to the gym, but instead of going for 2 hours, maybe just go for 1 hour, get home for 9 o'clock, and then do something else. And one other thing is that when lockdown actually did kick in, but gyms were open at that time. I think it was when did this lockdown start? I think it was beginning of January, wasn't it? January. So gyms were still open in October. So what I started doing was the gym opens at 6 o'clock in the morning. So a couple of times, maybe I did it once a week or twice a week or whatever. I used to try and wake up just purposefully and then go to the gym in the morning at 6 a.m. And then a couple of people said to me, what's the point? Like, even the guys at the gym, they used to laugh and say, you come at 8 in the evening, but you used to, why now 6 a.m.? I said, you know what it was? I said that I just wanted to know that I could do it. If I wanted to get up at 6 a.m. and go to the gym and I had the motivation to do it, I wanted that control over myself in a sense that just go. If I can do it, why not? Do you know what I mean?
Okay, then next time you do that, let me know, man. Knock on my door.
I don't think it's happened. If gyms are open, I would go. I don't think
you know the problem is I've been. I saw Abid as well yesterday. You know Imam Abid, the masjid, and you know, he was telling me, you know, a brother came in and he was talking about his weight and he's gone running in this many this many miles that they rode the bike and he's lost, you know, 0.2 kg and all. Actually, the last time I checked on my scale, it was like 2-3 years ago. We were discussing weight.
That's why you look so happy. It's fine. That's why you look so happy.
The problem is, but I've always said to myself, he said in the even lockdown, I said I was going to go for a run. And, you know, subhanAllah, you really need to push yourself. You know, I think one of the things I've noticed as well, like you said, is that you just need to start. And once you start, you continue. But I think with everything with being so busy, I think it's just prioritizing that accordingly. It
was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you at the beginning, actually. It was like, what's stopping you from taking that big step in your life? And a lot of the time it's fear. It's just fear of thinking, what could happen if I don't do this? Or what could happen if I do this? And a lot of the time, the fear, as soon as you take that step, it's like there was nothing to be fearful of.
Yeah,
When we were talking
Actually,
about,
you know, one thing always, and I say this with everything now, is that what you imagine is always worse than the reality. Now I've come to that. It's like a guided of principle for me. Like whether it's if someone who wants to do public speaking, or someone's going to go to a new job, or someone's going to do something which is new that they're not done before. The fear, like you said, the imagination goes into overdrive, and you think this is going to happen, that's going to happen. The reality, it's nothing like that. So actually, you do have to kind of overcome that, and it's a lot of it psychologically. You know, making sure that you overcome your own internal inhibitions. To get my point? So
because it's something
yeah,
you never experienced before. Just a natural
Yeah.
release of a human to think these. It's like a natural sort of like a consequence, I guess, of
Yeah.
wanting to take that next step. But a lot of it is
Yeah.
just irrational fear. As soon as you do it, you just think, well, I should have done this before.
Yeah,
Even the third
exactly. Yeah,
podcast I did, like, it's probably like the 8th or 9th episode. The first podcast I did, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, oh, what if you forget to say something? Or what if you can't, on the spot, what if there's a moment of silence? Then you start thinking, it can't happen. Like, it doesn't matter. So what? What's the worst that can come from even that moment of silence where you're thinking of something to say? What's that worst that can come from that?
Yeah, 100%.
It's a lot of it. I don't know where where we was at, to be honest. I don't know where the tangent the tangent came from. Okay, so how can you manage time better then? Let's say you said you can't manage time. Time isn't manageable. It's more you manage yourself.
Yeah.
As a university student, let's say even if someone's not involved in ISoc, but someone as a university student always have either a part-time job, someone's trying to go to the gym, sort of they're involved in a society of something, they've got extracurricular activities, what could be something that they can, because as university students, to be honest, when a lot of the sheikhs and ustads used to come last year to the ISoc events, one thing that always used to emphasize on, oh, your university, you've got so much free time.
Yeah.
Why is this, and what can we do with this free time? How can we balance this free time if we do so have it? Or even how can we fill it, let's say?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question, and you know, I suppose it, you know, this might get a bit deep. So just to let you know, I mean, the thing is, the reality is that, I mean, I've been to university. Many of us have gone to university, and it's true. You know, when you're at university, and this is for anyone watching who's at university, is that you have, as an individual, okay, you might be involved in ISocs. For those who might be doing PhD, might be slightly different. But for those in undergrad, even postgrad to an extent, and like masters, maybe not PhD, but to an extent, the reality is that most people aren't married at that point. They don't have the kind of the responsibility of children. They do have a lot of free time, even if you're involved in societies. Okay, fair enough. Islamic society, I know it can get busy, but the reality is when you compare it to when you're older, I always have this thing, you don't have time to go to the bathroom these days, you know, when you get older, because
you followed to the bathroom.
You followed everywhere, yeah. Even my wife is like, you know. So the thing is that the reality is that there is a lot of time. Now, what I would say to people is that, you know, in that kind of 17, 18-year-old to the 25-year-old time, this is probably the golden age of an individual. And you and I, or people in that time, they need to understand that actually really reflect on what do they want in life. And the reality is, we know that I did not create the kind of the jinn and the mankind except to worship me, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear that actually our whole life is to worship him subhanahu wa ta'ala. What you want to be in a situation, and I've mentioned this and I was thinking of doing like a visioning course, but you know, maybe it's going to be after Ramadan start time, but serious with the irony of that. So the thing is that the reality is that you want to be able to come to a stage whereby you say that what I live my life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the reality. And as I've mentioned before that some of the scholars said that the entrance into Jannah, or salvation from the fire, is by the forgiveness of Allah, and entrance into Jannah is by his mercy. But the rank with which you get into Jannah is by the deeds. So those who have got more deeds, more sincere deeds, greater in the eyes of Allah, they'll reach higher ranks. And some of them, you know, we know that a hadith which mentioned about some people on one level of Jannah will look to the people at the other level of Jannah as if we see the stars in the sky. And so there will be differences in terms of, everyone will enjoy Jannah, inshallah ta'ala, but there will be differences in manazil and ranks. And so what is it? It's about competition for doing good, right? Now, the reality is that we, and I say for myself and others, is that you need to really think that how do I want to reach the station where I please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So for some people, they'll say, I want to memorize the Quran. And I have this statement, I say, when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah, what is it that you're going to say to him that you're going to say, I'm proud I did this for your sake? Because the answer to that question is really what you need to focus on in your spare time. Because some people say, I want to meet Allah and say, I memorized the kitab of Allah, the book of Allah. And so when that's something that they know that Allah will love, then the first thing you need to start doing is start to try to do some hifz and learn tajweed and etc. Other people say that, I want to help people in whatever way, however you want to do it, be a doctor, you want to do something, whatever, then you're already setting some very key priorities in your life. And then you can do that through the visioning, you can be doing just sitting down for half an hour, reflecting, writing some notes, whatever it is. But once you get to that stage, then you need to start working on it. But one thing I would say to brothers and sisters, especially university students and people living in this society, because you're in a different way compared to people in Yemen and Syria and Libya and all of these things. They've got their different hardships, right? Our hardship in comparison to them is very different. And of course, it's not the same level, of course. But one of the things that we have is the concept of that we have the freedom to learn. And this is where I would say that learning knowledge, beneficial Islamic knowledge, there's one thing which is a fard al-ain, which is an obligation, individual obligation, the obligation of the basics of aqidah and fiqh, understanding how to pray and all of the nuances of that. That's a fard al-ain that has to be done. But there are many other things that people need to be learning based on their situation. So for example, if you are married, then you have to know about the rules of talaq and zawaj, the rules of divorce and the rules of marriage. If you're involved in business, you need to know the rules of transactions. Umar radiallahu anh used to go into the market and he would kick out everyone who didn't know the rules of that. These are not rules, dry rules. These are actually ways to know what is permissible versus what is impermissible in the eyes of Allah. Now, what I would say very briefly without prolonging is that the seeking of knowledge, some of the scholars, Sufyan al-Thawri from Iraq, Hadith, he said that ليس شيء بعد الفرائض أفضل من طلب العلم, that there's nothing greater after the fara'id, individual obligations, except the seeking of knowledge. And actually that's correct in the sense that the one who learns knowledge, yani knowledge which is beneficial to him to bring him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing better than that. And one of our teachers, Shaykh Abdullah, used to say, who is better than the one who the people come to him to ask, what does Allah want from me? Do you get my point? That person who's got knowledge of tafsir, knowledge of the Quran, knowledge of the Sunnah, the people come to him because they say to him that, what do I have to do in this circumstance to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Who's better than that? And so what I would say to brothers and sisters is that take time to learn Arabic, take time to learn fiqh, go to tafsir, go to hadith. People think that, I have time, I don't have time. Wallahi, if you do that, your life will be better internally, spiritually, and outwardly as well. So that's the one thing I'd say, try to fill your time with that, or doing something. If you can't do that so continuously, then doing things which are going to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that differs upon everyone else.
There's something I heard which is quite profound recently actually as well, linking to that, is that knowledge is only given to people, Allah gives it to the person who's deserving of that knowledge. So not everyone encompasses knowledge, otherwise we'd all be sat here, we'd all be calling ourselves Sheikh, Alim, Ustadh. Do you know what I mean? So it's only given of someone who's deserving of that. And obviously I took it a little bit deep, because I was like, if you listen to that and then for a fact that you're not a person of ilm, you're not a person of knowledge, you don't encompass what you see even the natural layman does, then I think you take it in a way, if you take that and then you think, I'm going to better myself for this reason. If I better myself, you never know what Allah Azza wa Jalla might give me. In terms of knowledge, you might, maybe if I want to do hifth, the first thing I've got to do, reduce my sin, better myself, and then I'll start hifth. Or even if I start that, it might take away some sin from somewhere else, and it might lead to a different path, and I might fill that time which I'm going to reduce for sin, I might fill it with something better in terms of knowledge. I might go and learn what aqidah means, I might go and learn what fiqh I'm supposed to be doing for this act or whatnot. So I took it, I just thought it was a little bit deep. When I heard that, it blew my mind a little bit, but it sort of made me ponder upon it. Think that if you're serious about being like a talib al-ilm, or you're serious about even taking that first step into seeking knowledge, I think I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the first step is reduce your sin or better yourself so you're deserving of that knowledge and sharing that knowledge with other people.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that. I mean, the other side, you could say that actually by learning knowledge, it will help you to reduce sin as well. There's an ayah of Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء, that indeed those who really fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ulama, i.e. the people of knowledge. Meaning that actually knowledge by itself can bring about khashya, can bring about fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not for all cases, because there are people that we know, for example, Orientalists, who know more than some scholars, for example, or not scholars, I'd say maybe students of knowledge, but they don't have any belief. So it's not absolute, but generally, knowledge does help in terms of removing, because when you start to learn what's important, and that brings about priority as well. So for example, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah mentions that, just to give an example, he says that when you're in the masjid and you're reading Quran, and this is just a small example, but it helps to understand that how knowledge allows you to put your priorities in life as well, is that reading of the Quran is better generally than dua, and generally better than, say, tasbih, for example, because the Quran is the kalam of Allah. Generally, and in terms of what the scholars say, is that the Quran is better than that. However, if you're in the masjid and you're reading Quran and the adhan happens, right, even though recitation of the Quran is better than, say, the dhikr, when the adhan happens, we know that the Prophet ﷺ advised us that when the adhan happens, that we repeat after the adhan. So at this stage, that we say that the actual knowledge tells us that you should stop the Quran and you should recite the dua after, or you should repeat after the adhan, because the Prophet ﷺ did that. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that it does help knowledge help prioritize things. So for example, you want to go and you want to do something, but your mother wants something from you. You will know that someone of knowledge who understands the rights of their parents and the rights of other people, etc., they know that what is the priority I need to do at the moment. So, I mean, knowledge is something which helps to that. I mean, what I would caveat this with, though, is that, of course, you're right. Not everyone is going to be a talib al-ilm. That's not meant to be the case, in the sense that just because you're a student of knowledge doesn't mean that you're going to be better than someone else. There's no doubt that's not the qaida. One thing I've always said, I remember one of our teachers said, it's not about what you reach. It's not the natija. It's not the result. It's all about the endeavor, right? So you might only have the ability to go to, a class a week or every 2 weeks for whatever reason, because you're really busy, you're doing medicine, and you're doing something there, but someone else is going to 5 classes a week. Does that mean he's better? No. It just means that at that time you're striving to do that one class, to do it in the best way, but you have something else which is very important, like your medicine degree, which actually may help more people in terms of, in the long run, for whatever reason. Now, it's not about how much you do. It's all about the endeavor. It's all about what hardship you're going. The ulama mentioned al-qadru bi ajr al-mashaqqa, al-ajr bi qadr al-mashaqqa, that the ajr, the reward, is in accordance with the hardship faced. So if you are someone who's struggling to go to a class, you've got kids hanging off you, you're struggling here and there, but you're really trying to do what you're doing, and this other guy is just like ordering takeouts and he's chilled, he's just no responsibilities, that same hour, we say that potentially that lady who is struggling is getting a multitude more of rewards than the individual, because she's going through more hardship. And hardship isn't related to just pain. It's related to stress. It's related to responsibility. It's related to managing, doing a medicine degree and looking after your mother and doing all of these things. So the point I'm trying to make is that, we don't say in absolute terms that seeking of knowledge is, the most important thing for every single person. But what we say is that give it some time, which it deserves, and also use it to help you prioritize your life, to see what is the best thing to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
There was 2 things I mentioned, actually. One is that is it true that every sin is only due to ignorance? So every sin that you can possibly always leads back to ignorance, because when you're sinning, you really don't know what the consequence of that sin is, or who Allah is. So if you learn about these things and you weren't ignorant of this and you had knowledge of this, then you wouldn't actually sin.
Yeah, I mean, that's one part. There's shahawat and shubahat, they call it. They say that there's one which is ignorance is removed by knowledge. Like you said, ignorance is one of the reasons. The other one is shahawat, desires, so your internal desires. So yeah, you're right in that sense.
It's quite an extensive subject. Even if we went on the concept of seeking knowledge and its importance, and actually, there's a question I did want to ask about that. So importance. Even if we went on that and sin, it's a whole podcast in itself. I think you could talk about seeking knowledge.
Each of these things we've talked about, even time management and
Yeah.
priorities and talab al-ilm, they're all, you know,
they're quite large, broad subjects. So I think this is just like an overall sort of summary, personal experience and stuff. But one question I wanted to ask is, say somebody is a university student, what should they then prioritize in terms of seeking knowledge? And I know everyone's at different stages. So someone might not even know how to read Quran. They might have to go and learn how to do that first. But what's the first step one should take? Even, let's say they want to, and there's a reason why I want to ask this actually, because we were talking about it within ISoc. We've got Discover Islam Week coming up, and for those who don't know, Discover Islam Week is basically a week where it's like an intense, basically, like, what is Islam? It's for non-Muslims to come and discover what Islam is, in a sense. And we know that this year it's going to be on virtual, so our audience is slightly different. So us as MMU, we renamed it to Rediscover Islam. And why we did that,
good idea,
why we did that is because we know our audience is going to be Muslims predominantly. So what we wanted to do was go for the theme of dig deeper. Dig deeper meaning, like, okay, the last year we had the topics of going back to the fundamental basics, the 5 pillars. What is Salah? Who is Allah? Who is the Prophet? But this year we thought, okay, yes, certain Muslims might not know that, but everyone should have basic understanding of that. So there's no point us repeating or regurgitating what everyone else is telling them. So we said dig deeper, meaning instead of talking about who Allah is, find out what Aqidah is. Like, how should you go about studying that? Because it sort of encompasses the same thing. You're going to be talking about who Allah is, the name, attributes, what they sort of, the concept of that. And instead of talking about who the Prophet is, in which obviously that's a seerah and you can talk about it, a whole course in itself even. Let's talk about fiqh and the importance of studying fiqh and what the Sunnah tells us to do in certain instances. And even instead of talking about what the Quran tells us, let's talk about pondering upon certain aspects of it and the tafsir of it. So why I'm asking that is, I've gone off in a little tangent. I'm sort of forgetting my point. The reason why I was saying that is because what is the importance of these, and how should a student take that first step into studying the likes of Aqidah, fiqh and Quran and Hifth, and there's so much obviously we can go and I think even now it's quite hard. Like, people say it's easy. People say it's easy to seek knowledge because of it's all online and we've got access to the tools. But I think now more so, especially with the da'wah scene that's going on, I don't want to get into it too much, but I think it's even now it's quite hard to sort of find the path that you're supposed to be taking, in a sense, and who even you're supposed to take it from. And that isn't my question about who to take knowledge from. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, like, what's the easiest way to go about it in simple terms for a layman, someone who doesn't really...
So first and foremost, definitely, I would advise the first port of call is to find a teacher. The reason being is that you can learn online, and this, we do classes online and things like that. Of course, with COVID, inshallah, we're going to come out of COVID. Ideally, you'll have face-to-face time with the teacher, whether in a class environment. That I would say that you should try to, that would be the first priority. Because the reason being is that the deen has been done by something called talaqqi. Talaqqi is that kind of, one-to-one or one-to-many people learning from other people directly. And also the teacher, ilm is one thing, but adab is what is learned from the teacher as well. So how do you, the way of learning knowledge, how you interact with people, what's important, all of these things come through a teacher. So the first thing is that if someone has the ability, they should find a teacher, right? And then that teacher will guide them accordingly, and they generally follow the same thing. If they can't, then they can do it online. That's no problem. But they should strive to at least try to find a teacher. Even one class a week is fine. Yani half an hour, 45 minutes a week, they go to a dars, is the best way. Now, in terms of what do they do, very briefly, so some people say start with tajweed, right? Based on some of the scholars, they said that, post Surah Al-Fatiha, which is a condition for the salah, it has to be done with the right tajweed, i.e. that not changing one letter for another letter or harakah for another harakah. And if you've not been taught correctly, then you potentially are reciting Surah Al-Fatiha incorrectly, and hence your salah may be invalid, according to some scholars, not all scholars. So one thing I would say is tajweed is a good thing to start with. 2 reasons. One, because you're learning about how to recite the Quran properly. But second, it starts to give you a ta'alluq and correct connection with the Quran, which I think is important. So that's one. Second thing, which is in parallel, they're not one based on another, which is in parallel, is fiqh. yani the standard of kind of, okay, well, so they put these not in particular order, but these are all very important. Fiqh in terms of how to pray. So the ahkam and the rulings of wudu, doing a prayer, paying zakah if you've got above the nisab, the Ramadan, the ahkam and the rulings of Ramadan. You don't need to know the evidences. The person who is a beginner doesn't know to know any evidences. He just has to know what's halal, what's haram in that. And then, of course, if they're married, then the ahkam of kind of talaq and zawaj and all of these other things that they need to do. So that's fiqh. Then the third main element is aqidah. And you could argue, people will say that aqidah is the first thing. Aqidah is technically the first thing out of all of these. The reason why I said it last is that generally, people have the correct aqidah generally from what they've been taught when they're young. It's not a case, they say that on the student or the army, the general person, is that it's upon him to know the general elements of aqidah, not the tafsil. He doesn't need to know what the specifics are regarding, some of the things which are differed upon amongst the ulama. But he just needs to know that there is none worthy of worship except Allah, that the Prophet ﷺ is his messenger, that, the shafa'ah, the concept of intercession and who that is inclined towards, the concept of Jannah and Jahannam and all these akhirah and all of these things. So that can be done quite easily. It's text aqidah tahawiyah, or some people do al-wasitiyah, some people do other things. But again, doing it with a student. Now, to be fair with you, Ismail, very briefly, those three things can be learned quite quickly, right? In the sense that you will get what you need in order to fulfill your obligation in terms of your connection with Allah. And then after that, your teacher will guide you. Some will say do 40 hadith nawawi because it's good for the khuluq. Some people will say, other things. They might do some tafsir of the last 10 surahs, whatever. But those three are generally what's required at the beginning for every beginner, inshallah.
I think that's a good sort of a point to not end on, but I think it's a good tips that people can take as well.
Inshallah.
Yeah, no, BarakAllahu feek, Ustadh. Like I said, there's a lot we can talk about. There's so much more we can go on.
Yeah, no,
I've just seen in the corner of my computer we hit the hour mark, and I know how busy you are, so I'm not going to try and take too much more of your time.
Are you sure people are going to be able to handle an hour, man? Might have to cut it down.
What's that? To cut it down to what?
I don't know, because sitting for an hour is hearing me talk. I don't know how people are going to manage that.
No, honestly, like I said, I could sit genuinely. I probably shouldn't be saying this on camera. I hope no one else is listening to the podcast, but it's probably one of the most enjoyable podcasts I've done. I think we spoke about a lot, and it's something that I think I needed to hear as well, more so than anyone else. So BarakAllahu feek, and may Allah allow us to put into action the things that have been said, and ponder upon it and develop upon it as well. I just wanted to thank you first, Ustadh, and everyone else out there that's listening as well. I think there's a hadith that says those who haven't thanked the people haven't thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, just a couple of things. We've still got our charity ongoing with Human Appeal. We've got the Pakistan water village, I think we're building this year. So the donation page is either in our website, mmuisoc.com, or manchesterisoc.com. You can donate to either. We've got a shop on there as well. You can buy the cakes, you can buy cake boxes, calligraphy pieces. There's all sorts of stuff going on. And also, Ustadh actually runs a program. Ustadh, you want to say just a quick brief about Al Ma'rifah Foundation as well?
Yeah, so very briefly, we've got so Al Ma'rifah Foundation is basically an educational organization in Manchester. And it basically does these kind of small courses. We do courses, kind of 1-year courses. We do 4-week courses, 8-week courses, basically for kind of professionals and students. So yeah, and we've covered things like Aqidah, Hadith, Fiqh, Tafsir, these elements. And we've done some online as well. We have different teachers. Ustadh Hisham is one of our teachers, Imam Abid. We've got Sheikh Sajid Umar who's doing a course, inshallah, on Tuesday. So yeah, inshallah, if people are able to attend, inshallah. And we, like I said, there is a small fee, but anyone who's not able to pay, they can join for free. It's not a problem, inshallah.
And the fee that you pay, to be honest, is minute compared to
it's only, to be honest with you, the reason why we kept it is that actually it makes someone serious. But if someone says they can't pay, they automatically come in free. There's no discussion about it.
Yeah, we was going to do that actually. With an ISoc, we realised we can't charge students. It's quite hard. The only reason we wanted to do it was if we do a course, the seriousness of it, because it's the concept is human thinking. If you paid for something, you're going to take it a bit more serious. Exactly. Get your money. You know what us Asians are like? Get your money's worth for anything as well. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, Jazakallah khair to Ustadh and everyone out there that's listening. BarakAllahu feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
وديني سلامي يا رايح للحرم وادعي لي وسلم لي على هذه الأمم.